Good day, everyone. So we are the group 2 of today's report, and our topic will be all about environmental crisis and factors of sociocultural impact. So in today's modern world, the environmental crisis is one of the most serious issues that is faced nowadays in the ecosystem. Environmental issues include climate change, pollution, resource depletion, and biodiversity loss, which threatens the ecosystem, humans, and animals. This crisis results in different consequences on societies and cultures and how people live in the environment. Moreover, as environmental crises continue to worsen, it can negatively impact different aspects such as short supply on natural resources, health risks, lifestyle, and many more. For these reasons, awareness of these topics can resolve the issues. So let's start with environmental crisis. So there are different environmental crises. So let's start with climate change. So here are the causes and its impact. So first is greenhouse gas emission. So as greenhouse gas emission covers the earth, it traps the heat of the sun, which leads to climate change and global warming, wherein its impact is the rise in global temperature. Next will be the deforestation. So the role of, as we all know, the role of trees is to provide oxygen and absorbs carbon dioxide. However, due to purposely chopping trees in forests, carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere along with the greenhouse gas emissions, which contribute to climate change, wherein its impact will be extreme weather events. And lastly, for industrial activities, so as construction occurs in certain natural areas such as in the forest, they contribute to climate change by burning fossil fuels, which releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and deforestation. Furthermore, it threatens wildlife survival, which may lead to animal extinction. So its impact is biodiversity loss.
Next, we have pollution. We have three types of pollution. We have air pollution, water pollution, and soil pollution. Let's start with air pollution. So air pollution, it is mainly caused by industrial emissions, vehicular exhaust, burning fossil fuels. Ang example nito is like yung mga factory sa mga industrial emissions nga, mga factory na sobrang ah, lala nung mga usok. Vehicular exhaust naman yung mga jeep natin dito sa Pilipinas. Yung mga sobrang iitim na yung usok nila. Next is water pollution, like yung mga industrial waste, agricultural runoffs, sewage discharge, plastic pollution. Ang example nito is yung parang nangyari sa Ilog Pasig na sobrang polluted ng water dahil sa pagtatapon ng mga waste nga. Pero buti naman ngayon na nililinis naman na siya. And lastly, we have the soil pollution, like heavy metals, too much pesticide, fertilizers, and industrial waste. Yung mga irresponsible na mga tao na ginagamit ng husto yung lupa na binibigyan ng sobra-sobrang pesticide, fertilizer, ganun.
Hello everyone, I am Romnick Dison and today I'll be discussing about the resources depletion. Ang meaning ng resources depletion is yung mga natural resources natin like yung mga water, yung mga soil, minerals, and forests and fossil fuels are used up faster than they can be replaced. For example, yung overfishing. For example, na yung nangisda ka ngayon, nakakuha ka ng 1 million na isda. And kinabukasan yung na marireplace lang nun is 500,000 na isda. 'Di ba? Magkakaroon tayo nun ng shortage. And another example is yung puno. Magkakat tayo ng puno para kumuha tayo ng mga 100,000 na puno. Pero ang tinanim lang natin bukas is mga 50,000 lang. 'Di ba? Magkakaroon tayo ng shortage. Yung mga resources natin is yung mga natural resources natin, masyado silang nagagamit na kesa sa nare-replace sila. And this leads to a shortage nga and making it harder for people and animals and plants to survive. Ang mga causes nito include overpopulation. Kasi nga madami na tayo dito, madami na din tayong kukunin ng mga resources and this lead to mga shortage. Yung mga example na lang, 'di ba? Dito lang sa Pilipinas yung uh, last mga January per se yung kamatis, 'di ba? Yung kamatis ay masyado na siyang nagmahal kasi nga nawalan tayo, nagkaroon ng shortage ng kamatis. And example, another cause nito is include yung deforestation. Yung madami na tayong kinukuhang puno na dun sa mga kesa dun sa mga tinatanim natin, kaya nagkakaroon tayo ng shortage. And overfishing, yun din. Kung kinuha natin, per se example is 1 million na isda, pero ang mga nasisilang lang na isda is 500,000, in the next years, mararamdaman natin yung shortage na yun. And yung mga mining and excessive use ng mga fossil fuel natin. Lalo na tong mga excessive mga fossil fuel na to is ang hirap nilang para ma-replace. Kasi nga, yung mga resources, ang mga fossil fuels na to is it takes 1,000 years bago sila ma-replace. Kasi nga matagal talaga silang ma-replace. Kaya dapat ingatan natin talaga tong mga fossil fuels natin. And ang mga effects nito include nga yung mga soil erosion kasi nga masyado tayong nagpuputol ng mga puno, loss of clean water kasi nga yung mga overfishing natin nagko-cause ng kasi yung mga fish din natin nililinis din yung yung dagat natin, yung mga ocean natin. And higher cost for basic needs. Yun nga, 'di ba? Yung mga kamatis natin, yung mga basic needs natin is masyado na siyang mahal, umabot ata ng 200, 'di ba? 200 per kilo. And it can also cause environmental damage. And para to slow yung mga resource depletion, people can use mga renewable energy and sometimes mga basic education lang para ma-practice yung natin, para ma-lessen yung pagkuha natin ng mga resource. For example, dun sa overfishing, kung nakakita ka na sana na buntis na isda, dapat pakawalin mo na. Huwag mo na siyang kukunin. Pero 'di ba, dito sa Pilipinas, yung mga tao parang mas gusto pa nila yung mga may buntis na mga isda kasi kinakain nila yung puga, 'di ba, doon sa ito. Kaya yun yung maling mindset natin na kailangan natin ibahin. Dapat na pag may nakita na buntis, pakawalan na. Kasi yung buntis na yun, magbubunga pa siya ng another generation ng mga isda. Diba?
Good day, everyone. Today, I will be discussing a critical environmental issue, which is yung biodiversity loss. So, biodiversity loss happens when different species of plants, animals, and microorganisms decline due to the human activities and environmental changes. This leads to imbalances in ecosystems, affecting both nature and human survival. So, yung mga causes nito includes habitat destruction from deforestation and urbanization, climate change, invasive species, pollution, and overexploitation of natural resources. So, one of the major causes of biodiversity loss is yung habitat destruction. As urbanization expands and forests are cleared for agriculture and development, countless species lost their homes, pushing them towards extinction. So, yung mga wetlands, coral reefs, and grasslands are also being destroyed, threatening many species that rely on these environments. And without these habitats, syempre ecosystem natin become unstable and food chains are disrupted, leading to further biodiversity loss. So, another significant factor is yung climate change natin. So, rising temperatures and unpredictable weather patterns disrupt ecosystems, forcing species to migrate or adapt. And unfortunately, many fail to do so, leading to population declines. So yung ocean acidification further threatens marine biodiversity, affecting coral reefs and shellfish populations. This is not only impacts marine species but also affects the livelihoods of people who depends on fishing and coastal resources for survival. And additionally, meron din tayong invasive species pose a serious threat. So, when non-native species are introduced into a new environment, they often outcompete local wildlife for resources, destab- destabilizing entire ecosystems. Some invasive species also bring new diseases that can wipe out native populations. For example, the introduction of certain predatory fish into freshwater lakes has led to the decline of native fish populations, affecting biodiversity and local economies that rely on fishing. Next is yung pollution. So, pollution is another major driver of biodiversity loss. Yung mga plastics sa ocean can endanger the marine life, and pesticides reduce insect populations, and industrial waste contaminates ecosystems. Even yung mga light and noise pollution natin can disrupt yung animal behavior, affecting their survival. For example, yung marine animals natin that rely on echolocations kagaya ng dolphins and whales is nag-i-struggle sila to navigate and communicate due to increased noise pollution sa ocean. Furthermore, overexploitation naman of species through overfishing and deforestation has put many plants and animals on the brink of extinction. So, unsustainable hunting and logging practices threaten entire ecosystems, leading behind long-term damage, and if species continue to disappear at this rate, it will have irreversible consequences for biodiversity, affecting food security, medicine, and even climate regulation. So, to slow biodiversity loss, people can support conservation efforts, reduce pollution, protect habitats, and adopt sustainable practices like responsible farming and fishing. Kasi yung loss of biodiversity natin is hindi lang siya environmental issue. It is also a social and economic issue. So, many communities, especially mga indigenous groups natin, is nagdidepend sila sa biodiversity for their way of life, syempre, including na dito yung food, medicine, and cultural practices. So, if biodiversity continues to decline, it will lead to ecosystem collapse, food shortage, and economic instability worldwide.
So now, I'll be presenting the significant factors impacting our sociocultural environment and will examine how environmental changes directly affect our health, economies, social structures, and cultural heritage. Our sociocultural environment is profoundly shaped by a complex interplay of factors. Environmental changes, in particular, have far-reaching consequences, impacting our health, economies, social structures, and cultural heritage. This interconnectedness means that environmental degradation doesn't just damage the natural world, it undermines human well-being and societal stability. We'll explore how these impacts manifest across health, economic, social, and cultural dimensions. The sociocultural environment isn't isolated. It is intricately linked to the natural environment, so changes in one area inevitably ripple through others. For health impacts, we first have air pollution, so this is caused by industrial emissions and vehicle exhaust. This leads to respiratory illnesses, cardiovascular diseases, and even premature death. So we also have water pollution from industrial discharge and agricultural runoff. So this causes waterborne diseases and contaminates food sources. And lastly, for health impacts, we have climate change. So this exacerbates these issues, leading to heat-related illnesses and the spread of infectious diseases.
So next, we have the economic impact. Meron tayong loss of livelihood, displacement of communities due to the environmental change. Ito na yung nawawalan na tayo ng mga basic necessities natin like yung mga food, water, shelter, and clothes. Next, we have the agricultural impact. Ito yung nagde-decrease na yung mga crops natin. Nagkakaroon na ng ah, food shortage, tas nagkakaroon na din ng price increase kasi nga kukulang na tayo ng supply ng pagkain. So, nag-increase na yung mga presyo ng pagkain. Next is tourist. Ito yung kapag na-damage na yung natural attraction, kaya nagde-decrease din yung mga tourist revenue natin. Siyempre, kapag nasira na yung mga natural attraction like yung mga forest, yung mga waterfalls, ganyan, magde-decrease talaga yung tourist revenue.
Next, we will be discussing its social impacts, focusing on migration and displacement, conflicts and tensions, and community disruption. These issues greatly affect societies worldwide, shaping the way people live and interact with their surroundings. Let us first discuss the migration and displacement. People forced to relocate due to environmental changes. What are those environmental changes? Environmental changes such as rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and resource depletion force many people to leave their homes. Climate-induced migration is becoming more common, particularly in vulnerable areas where disasters frequently occur. One good example of this is in the Philippines, wherein many residents from coastal areas like Tacloban were forced to relocate after the devastation caused by Typhoon Yolanda in 2013. Many of them never returned and had to settle in their relocation sites. Second is the conflicts and tensions, competition for resources, and environmental justice issues. As natural resources become limited due to environmental degradation, competition for these resources intensifies that leads to conflicts. Access to clean water, cultivable land, and food sources can trigger tensions between communities, regions, and even nations. Additionally, environmental justice issues arise when disadvantaged groups suffer the most of climate change impacts while having limited resources to adapt. This can lead to social unrest and further deepen inequalities in societies. Example of this is in Africa, wherein there is a conflict between farmers and livestock keepers in Nigeria. That conflict intensifies due to the limitation of water and fertile land. These groups compete for the remaining natural resources, leading to violent clashes in their communities. Lastly is the community disruption, erosion of traditional knowledge and cultural practices. Environmental changes also threaten cultural traditions and traditional knowledge. When communities are displaced, they lose their historical connection to their land, which affects their customs, practices, and livelihoods. The erosion of indigenous knowledge, which has been passed down from generations, weakens cultural identity and disrupts social unity. Example of this is in the Arctic region, indigenous Inuit communities are struggling to maintain their traditional hunting practices due to the melting ice caused by global warming. This affects their livelihood and cultural heritage, which is gradually fading away. In conclusion, environmental changes have far-reaching social impacts. Migration and displacement, conflicts over resources, and community disruption are critical issues that must be addressed through sustainable policies and global cooperation. Raising awareness and taking collective action can help mitigate these challenges and ensure a more stable future for affected communities.
Next is we're going to explore the cultural impacts of environmental changes. As our planet faces unprecedented challenges, these changes are not only affecting ecosystems but also deeply influencing human cultures, traditions, and ways of life. So let's break this down into three key areas. Number one is the loss of biodiversity. Number two is changing lifestyle. And three is the environmental activism. First, let's talk about the loss of biodiversity. For many cultures around the world, natural resources like forests, rivers, and wildlife hold profound cultural and spiritual significance. So, they are often central to traditions, rituals, and community identity. And however, as species disappear and ecosystems degrade, these cultural connections are being eroded. For example, indigenous communities who rely on specific plants or animals for ceremonies or medicinal practices are finding it increasingly difficult to maintain their tradition. So this loss isn't just ecological, it's a loss of cultural heritage and spiritual meaning. So yun yung loss of the biodiversity. So next, we have the changing lifestyle. As environmental conditions shift, whether due to climate change, resource depletion, or pollution, people are being forced to adapt. So this might altering traditional farming practices, relocating due to rising sea levels, or finding new ways to sustain livelihoods in resource-constrained environments. So these changes can be challenging as they often disrupt long-standing ways of life. And however, they also highlight human resilience and creativity in the face of adversity. So communities are finding innovative solutions to adapt, but this often comes at the cost of losing of traditional knowledge and practices. Let's discuss the rise of environmental activism. Number 3. As people witness the impacts of environmental degradation on their cultures and communities, many are taking action. So social movements focus on environmental protection are growing globally, driven by a desire to preserve not just the planet but also the cultural values tied to it. So from youth-led climate strikes to indigenous-led conservation efforts, these movements are reshaping societal priorities and pushing systemic change. So environmental activism is becoming a powerful cultural force, uniting people across borders to fight for a sustainable culture. So yun lang po sa loss of biodiversity, changing lifestyle, and environmental activism. In conclusion, the cultural impacts of environmental changes are profound and multifaceted. So the loss of biodiversity threatens cultural and spiritual traditions. Changing lifestyle naman po is force communities to adapt in challenging ways, and sa environmental activism naman po is emerging as a powerful response to this crisis. So understanding this cultural dimension is crucial as we work toward a more sustainable and equitable world.
So now we are in the last part, which is yung conclusion. So biodiversity loss driven by human activities threatens ecosystems, food security, and global stability, making its protection essential for sustainable future. So biodiversity is a critical issue that threatens the stability of ecosystem, food security, and the overall health of our planet. Human activities including deforestation, pollution, and overexploitation of natural resources have accelerated this crisis, and the consequences are severe, ranging from the collapse of ecosystems to the loss of essential services that biodiversity provides. And protecting biodiversity is not just an environmental responsibility but a necessity for ensuring a sustainable future for all. And here is we have a recommendation. First is we have the strengthen strengthen governance. So governments um, governments must implement and enforce strict environmental policies to protect ecosystem and regulate industries that contribute to biodiversity loss. Next is the enhanced social cohesion. So communities should be encouraged to participate in conservation efforts, raising awareness, and fostering collective action to protect biodiversity. Next is yung address social vul- vulnerability. So, uh, protecting vulnerable populations, particularly mga indigenous groups natin, who rely on biodiversity for their livelihoods should be prioritized through sustainable economic and social programs. And last is yung promote cultural preservation. Recognizing and preserving indigenous knowledge and cultural traditions related to biodiversity can help sustain conservation efforts and maintain ecological balance. So, by taking these steps, we can work towards a world where biodiversity is valued and protected, ensuring a thriving planet for future generations. So, that concludes our report on biodiversity loss, and it is a serious issue that affects our planet. But with awareness and action, we can make a difference. So, thank you so much for listening.